Hello, welcome. Welcome, everyone. I'm just going to give it a few minutes, let everyone get logged in and all that. As you're joining us, if you'd like to drop in the chat where you're tuning in from, that's always really fun to see. So go ahead and say hi, let us know where you are in the world. And we'll get started in just another couple minutes. Just want to give everyone a chance to get logged in here. Portland, hello. Lake Forest Park, the faraway island of Wallingford. That is where I am today as well. Anchorage, Alaska, amazing. Michigan, Seattle, Edmonds, Lake Stevens, Detroit, Los Angeles, awesome. People are tuning in from all over. Got some local friends and some further away friends, love that. Okay, I think we're gonna go ahead and get started here. I'm Zoe Friesen. I'm the events manager here at Booklarder, which is a community cookbook store located in Seattle, Washington. Very excited. Today we are going to be chatting with Maggie Zhu, who has authored this beautiful book that I'm holding in my hands, Chinese Homestyle, and she will be in conversation with Hsiao-Ching Chou. We're very delighted to have them. Before we dive into the talk, I'm just gonna go over a little bit of housekeeping, and then we will let them take it away. As you can imagine, we've been doing a lot more virtual events over the last few years. We have started doing more in-person events lately, which is delightful, but it's always so great to be able to have these virtual events as well. It's really allowed us to connect to such a broader audience in terms of our authors, and although Hsiao-Ching is a local interviewer, which is fantastic as well, it just really helps us connect with people from all over and incorporating them into our local scene. And of course, attendees from all over as well, which we love. So very delighted that you have joined us today. A couple of quick notes: the talk will be recorded and it will be posted up on our YouTube channel within about 48 hours. And if you've RSVP'd for the live, you will receive an email with that link as well. So you can watch the replay or send it to a friend or catch the end if you need to log off early. I do have the live transcript turned on, so you can control that at the bottom of your screen. You can flip that on or off if you would like to see that or would not like to see that. And then let's see, Maggie and Hsiao-Ching will leave time for a Q&A towards the end of the hour. So make sure you put all of your questions into the Q&A box so they can easily find those for you. And let's see, you can support the talk by purchasing a copy of Chinese Homestyle from Booklarder. We do have bookplate signed copies for Maggie, which we are delighted by. So I will go ahead and put that link in the chat so you can find it there. I think that's all for me. So without any further ado, I will turn it over to Maggie and Hsiao-Ching.
Hello. Thank you, Zoe. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in this evening. Here it's on the Pacific Coast, it's about 5 o'clock, so almost dinner time. Maggie, so wonderful to get to meet you in this venue.
Nice meeting you too.
Yeah,
very happy to connect.
So first, just a quick acknowledgement about Monterey Park and just, thinking about all the folks who were affected by that and just the community in general. It's just such a terrible thing at the New Year to have to think about such tragedies. So, but to happier things, Happy New Year, Maggie.
Happy New Year.
I love to, we kind of started off talking a little bit about what we did for New Year's, and I love how you described your tradition. So Maggie, maybe share a little bit about what you did for the New Year's.
So for my family, so I'm from Beijing, so it's northern part of China. And dumpling is always the really the main part of the New Year's party. So my family has this tradition to make dumplings on New Year's Eve. So all the family members will gather at my grandma's place. It's actually quite a bit of travel for my family. So it's like we are like driving for like 3 hours, and then there are people like kind of like coming from all over places, and they went to my grandma's place. They're always like a big crowd, like 20 people ish, and we make dumplings from early afternoon uh until like it goes into the evening. So we will make it from scratch, like preparing the dough and like make the wrappers and everybody participate and kind of like we have like work as a team. And after every batch is made, it just directly go into the boiling pot. We just cook them and we just share. So it's like a kind of like an all day event, and we're kind of just like snacking on dumplings and chat, and also turns on the the Chinese New Year show on the TV. So that's our New Year's Eve, and on New Year's Day we have this really big spread of like everything, like all the main dishes and the appetizers and soup, and like it's just like just huge spread of things to celebrate.
It's interesting because like my family has always done New Year's, the feast, on New Year's Eve. So it's
Mhm.
interesting that your family splits it up. And you were saying earlier that you have friends who have never made dumplings. How is that even possible?
I have no idea.
But they had other traditions as well.
Yeah, because I feel like it's shocking to me. I feel like I thought dumpling is a thing. Like I feel like dumpling and the noodles, right? The longevity noodles, like it's like a must thing. And turns out like every family is just so different. So I think, yeah, there are some family they just do the spread, like you said, this big thing. They just prepare a lot of dishes, and maybe there's not like a super special one like that they repeat every year. It's just like this big feast.
So what types of filling do you have for your dumplings?
I mean, so growing up, we have like this few really traditional fillings like my family makes. So usually it's pork and cabbage, napa cabbage. Sometimes we do pork and chive, but most of the time it's with the cabbage. Oh, and we like to add shrimp into it. So, usually I think it's the traditional one is using dried shrimp to add flavor, but my grandma is like, oh, this is like a very festive, occasion, so we have to add nice things to it. So we add some like shrimp to really boost the flavor, and we have a lamb filling. And I think that's also a northern thing. Like I think a lot of people like there are people they don't know that we eat lamb in China, but that's like another thing. My grandma really likes it. She used that lamb and zucchini and carrot.
Wow,
With
zucchini.
Yeah,
Wow, that's unexpected. I've not heard that in a dumpling
really.
filling. So I think that's
Oh,
really interesting.
really?
Yeah,
Yeah,
super fun.
it make it really juicy because we don't really squeeze out the water. So you just mix everything, and it's kind of we use a little bit soy sauce, Hsiao-Ching wine, and the Sichuan peppercorn. The Sichuan
Mhm.
peppercorn really works well with lamb. And then when you cook the dumpling, it kind of the lamb and the zucchini kind of release some juice, and they make it kind of like a soup dumpling. It's really nice.
Oh, that's delicious. That sounds really
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah.
So moving to kind of the story behind your blog, like how did you get to the point where you decided you wanted to have a blog?
I think I was just like not very happy with my day job, my
Oh,
corporate 9 to 5, my real job at the time. Uh, and I was like trying to find something fun to do. Like I growing up, I never did photography and such like what I'm doing now, but I always enjoyed like painting, drawing, graphic design, and all that stuff. And of course, it's like as an Asian family, your parents tell you like, oh, don't do this. Like you cannot do any of those things. Like not gonna make a living. Find a real job after graduation. So I was like, all right. Found a real job and could like now very satisfying to do. Let's
mhm.
put it that way. So I was just like kind of like trying to think of what to do, and that was the time actually I went to Japan to study graduate school for 2 years, and well I learned cooking. Like I started to cook a lot to feed myself, and that was after that. I graduated, I come back to China to find a job, and I thought, oh, I want to share all those dishes that I learned, and you know, uh, enjoyed. So I started blog at the time. It's like a side thing, I have my full-time job, but it's like a side hustle for a couple years.
What was your work? What were you studying?
Oh, I studied like economy, so like just like random, irrelevant thing, and my job was a bank job.
It's not irrelevant.
It's like, yeah, totally irrelevant.
So what got you into because you said that growing up you like many traditional families, they don't want their kids in the kitchen. They don't, they want you to
Yeah.
focus on your studies. So how in the act of feeding yourself did you suddenly unlock this passion for talking about food and developing
I think
recipes?
so. So one thing is like, even though I rarely cook anything, but I think, it's just the fact that I watched my mom cooking every day. So I have an idea of like how you do things, it's like, oh, I know how to cut things. And I think I know how to make a scrambled egg with tomato and fried rice. Like just I kind of just know how to, like, since I was real. I think the first time I cooked was maybe in middle school or something. Maybe when I was, I don't know, like 12 or 13. I cannot remember, but I was like fairly young, and it's just like, oh, I'm hungry. I need to do something, so I just make a stir fry. So it's like I kind of know how to do certain things, but also just like really just like a feeling. Like I don't know like a measurement or whatever, just kind of by observation. Like I know the like really basic, like how to boil some instant noodle and put in some vegetables like to make it nice, and then put it in an egg. But then after I went to Japan, I really, it's like just it gets really boring really fast when you just know how to do two things. So that's when I started to like, oh, I want to eat this. Like, oh, today I want a sweet and sour chicken. Like how I'm gonna do that. So I started to learn how to cook, and it was really fun. Yeah.
Like what were some of the dishes that you started off cooking?
I think the first thing I really wanted is my mom's fried cabbage. It's like this really simple thing. She just used like dried chili pepper and Sichuan peppercorn. It's like you heat those in the oil to make it very fragrant, and then you fry the cabbage, like really high heat, like to make them slightly soften, and then finish up with a splash of soy sauce. Like really simple. But it's like so nice, and I just couldn't do it right. I was like, no. I was asking my mom how to do it. She's like, do this and this, like do a splash of soy sauce and do this. And I was like, no, it doesn't. It didn't taste like what you made. Um, so yeah, I started off with some of my family dishes, like the real like basically soups and stir fries and maybe like a meat stew and something like a few very simple things. Um, but then I started to branch out more things like, oh, today maybe I want to grill some fish, or maybe I want to make a kimchi soup. Like it just started from there.
So at what point did you figure out that you needed an outlet for all of this? Like you had, it's more than just a couple of Instagram posts, but now you need a blog, you need a strategy for, what you're going to publish or what you're going to share. Like when did that click for you?
That was actually quite random. It was suggested by my friend. She was like, oh, we should do this thing. Because at the time there weren't the Instagram was there? No, Instagram hasn't been invented yet. So there were Facebook. But no, we didn't really use social media at all. And I mean, we just took a lot of pictures. Like you share it in a family group or something. Like you send it to friend. I think it's like a Google album, or like there's like a few very basic things like where you upload some pictures. And then my friend was like, oh, you know what? We should totally do the blog because it's really cool. A lot of people like blog about traveling and food, and maybe you can even make some money from it. So I started from there. I Googled how to start a food blog. Like literally did that. Like when I went home and just started.
So I'm sure there are people out there who are like, you literally Googled how to do a food blog and then became successful at it.
I feel like for me, I feel like that's my advice. So I feel like if you want to do something, just do it. Like I don't overthink things. But like, if you look at my first blog post, like it's just really, really bad. Like the terrible picture, the right, like typo in the title is like I was doing like a tuna arrabbiata pasta. I didn't know how to spell arrabbiata. It was wrong for many, many years. I was like, wow. After 5 years, I was like, wow, that's a typo on the on top, like for the dish. And I wrote like literally write 3 sentences like, oh, today I want to share this dish. I was like, I'm so excited. It's something like that. And the recipe is like just like it's like a really, really random thing. But I just feel like I think, oh, this is interesting. I wanted to try it, and I just started it. And and also I it keep on going because I think it was fun. It was a lot of work and a lot of like like a learning process, but I think it was fun that since I started, I should like give it some time to see where it goes. And I do think like I feel like because I've met so many people like later on in my life, they're like, oh, I want to start a blog because like there are so many and they're so cool, and they overthink things. They're like, oh, I have to master my photos first. I'm like, if you don't if you don't start, you never master it. So you should just like start right away.
That's great advice. So what were some of the things that to what have you improved over time? Like as you have done more blogging and more photography and more recipe writing,
I
like what
I mean it's everything, literally everything, because just it's so many things to learn. The writing was hard. Yeah, I mean, English is not my native language, but even native, like my Chinese writing was not good either. So it's like a lot of things to work on. Like recipe writing is like, how you write recipes that people can follow and understand. Like down to how you describe how you cut things, or how you prep things. Like it's like I read so many books on I read Diane Jacobs' Will Write for Food. I guess I feel like, oh, there's so many rules about recipe writing. And
Mhm.
then I learn about photography. It's like, because you look at other people, it's like, why my pictures just look so different? Like and then there are so many aspects from it. Like, and over the years, I figured out, oh, not only I have to learn photography, you actually have to learn about food styling, because
Mhm.
food styling is a totally different thing. And then you'll figure out, oh, not just food styling, there's a prop styling. It's like what plate and background to use. Like that's like a different topic. And when you combine everything, it finally you'll make like image like, oh, this looks nicer now. And just like so much, even like cooking, just for the not just for cooking for myself, but figure out how to make a dish that is approachable for my readers, because that's actually really, really important, because I remember back in China, I read recipes, like I actually share a lot of family recipes, and I was wondering like why people don't cook these. And then I come to the US, I figure out people won't buy a whole chicken and cut them into pieces and braise them just for dinner. It's like a very Chinese thing to do. It's like feel like, oh, now I know why like no one does it. Like I like now living in the US, I wouldn't do that either. It's like so much work. But there's like process of like, oh, you actually don't have those cuts here, or like people don't do things this way. Um, like a process of understanding like how people cooks and how American kitchen functions, all of that stuff.
So you learned all of that in a relatively short period of time. I mean, that's an overwhelming amount of information and technique and practice. How did you how did you make sense of all of that without kind of giving up?
Oh, it's not that short. It's been 9 years. I feel like it's pretty long. I think it's just like a little by little, and also the fact that because I've been just doing it constantly because it's, I think at the beginning I was sharing maybe 3 recipes per week, and now I try to do maybe 2 and sometimes 1 to 2, but I think I never really stopped, paused my work. And it's always this, instead of like waiting for, inspiration struck, I try to like do something. And by doing something, you kind of just improve it over time.
So don't be afraid to start. So advice from Maggie, don't be afraid to start, just start and then learn as you go and improve as you go.
I think so, because then you have to like work on one thing at a time. Like even now, I feel like my to-do list is like that long. I was like, wow, there's like 200 things. Like maybe I couldn't get to them this year, like next year.
Right, right. I think that's a healthy way to go. So tell me about sort of this move toward plant-based.
So
Your book, yeah, your book has a lot of is all plant-based recipes. So you had a
yeah, so
transition there.
that is really like a kind of like my fun personal project. I wasn't even sure if it's a good decision to use a book as a very like personal project, but we ended up doing that because uh as a family my husband and I started to eat more plant-based because just at first we just wanted to test out. And my husband Thomas, he is really into it because it helps him you know, running, because he trains for a marathon and he races and all that stuff. And he's like, oh, because he also tried out very different things, and we decided to give plant-based a try. We did like a couple months just go on like full plant-based, and I really liked it a lot. I feel like I never would have tried it myself if it's not like he suggested it, because I just cannot imagine. It's like, oh, I like to put a little bit of meat in the dish to boost the flavor, even if it's not a meat dish. But after we tried that out, I really, really enjoyed it. I think, oh, it is like there are so many things you can try, and then I discovered more like different ingredients and different cooking methods, and I was very intrigued. And I do feel like it made me feel more energetic and more lighter. After eating, I don't feel like taking a nap or drinking coffees to stay awake. Um, and I also think it's just overall like well-being. Like you don't need that much food in general. Like I feel like I've been kind of overeating after I come to US. Like food is just so good, and there's like uh so many nice things. I kind of been overeating things. But then like after I went into plant-based, I feel like I started to eat really clean, and I feel like, oh, I kind of eat more in tune with my body, if that makes sense. And also, so that was like after that, we moved to New York, and we started to get exposed to all kinds of like really interesting restaurants. Like there are so many like fantastic plant-based restaurants there. And then I discovered my favorite Buddhist cuisine restaurant. And I learned so many things. Quite a few dishes in this book is actually inspired by the restaurant dishes. It's like so flavorful and amazing. I just really want to share that. It's like, oh, you know what? You can make it plant-based and it tastes like really, really great.
Can you say more about the Buddhist vegetarian cuisine and what that's about?
So it's a I think it has long tradition, like a very, very long tradition in China. It's like a type of cuisine that, is like it's monk food originally. But actually, later on it got developed. It's not just about like, oh, eating something really plain and simple like congee, and like there's a lot of rules like no garlic, no onion, and like very little seasoning. It's just like very simple food. But it got developed into this totally interesting, it's called Buddhist cuisine, but it's really not really limited to monk food. It's really about like how to use all kinds of ingredients to make a meat dish and make it exactly like, the texture and the appearance and the taste like are very similar. I went to some of the like, I think vegetarian food is getting way more popular these days. Like I feel like last time, a couple years ago, I went back to China. There was like more like vegetarian dim sum pop up. I was like, wow, these are amazing. I've never had that growing up. But growing up, I went to those like Buddhist food. Like there's a few nice restaurants, and the dishes are so exquisite. Like they do some, they're like they have kung pao chicken, but it's like made with mushrooms, and it looks so pretty, and the texture is like amazing. And they, some dishes are made with mock meat, which is like pretty much Satan. But restaurant they make those things themselves. Like they have like their own formula to make all kinds of mock meat, and then they make them into like stews or stir fries. Like it tastes really, really similar to the original meat dishes. So, it's a really interesting topic to explore, I think.
So we have a question from somebody about what was the restaurant in New York City that that you went to that you were inspired by?
Oh, so there's a place called Buddha Bodai in Chinatown. The Manhattan Chinatown. It's this like there are actually two. So one, I think there's one a copycat. I've been both. So the one I like is called the original Buddha Bodai. They're like super close to each other, but they're like they're both are good. And if you go there, try their char siu. So they make their own mock meat and make to make those char siu. I was like really like blow my mind. I was like, this like tastes like real to me. And it's like so good. Very, very real. I still couldn't figure out how to make them. So not included in this book. I don't know how they made it. Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of it is just texture, is like trying to replicate the texture, because a lot of the seasonings for the meats you can apply to mock meat or imitation meat, but yeah, it's just getting the texture right as well. So that's cool. And so the other thing I observed about a lot of your recipes is that you're very much open to adaptation, which is to say, for example, you don't have to use a wok, you can use a skillet, just depending on what you need. Just you're not too precious about all of the most traditional techniques. Can you say a little bit about that?
It's not. It sometimes got frowned upon by Chinese chefs, which I totally understand. I still think wok is very I really like the way you get that smokiness is like you cannot recreate that from a skillet, unfortunately. But I cook with a skillet a lot myself from my own experience, because back to when I was studying in Japan, wok cooking is not really a thing. It's like very hard to get. So I was dealing with a skillet for 2 years. So I cook all my food there. I was like, okay, I know the difference, because there are certain things you just like couldn't do with it, but then you'll find like ways around it and still make it nice. And then and I moved to the US, and we moved around a bit, and we've been living in different like rental apartment, and the stove are just like I always had issue with the stove. There's an electric stove. I was like get very frustrated, and I read about that. There are almost 2/3 of the U.S. household that do not use a gas stove. So I feel like gas stove is a really special thing here. And if I'm only constrained with cooking with a wok, then there are so many people who actually really couldn't learn from like what you're doing here, because like I tried with like electric stove, it just couldn't work. Absolutely not going to work. Like flat bottom, all kinds of material. The closest I tried is like with a cast iron. It's like you literally you need to heat it up for like 15 minutes, and it get hot, and then put the things in, poof, it get cold again. It was like impossible. And even with gas stove, like even now, like so right now we actually I renovated my own kitchen right here, and I got a pretty good stove. I still think when I use the biggest wok, I try with the large one, the carbon steel, like the like kind of like the restaurant. it never hit up properly. I just still couldn't. I feel like it's food still gets steamed. Right now I still use a skillet, and I have a very small, very cute 9-inch wok, like really really small. It can only make 2 portions of food. Like that is the only one and I have actually a fairly good stove. And so I feel like when I teach Chinese cooking, especially for a beginner, if I start to tell them like, oh, you actually need to buy this and buy this, maybe you need to upgrade your stove. Like nobody's gonna cook it.
That's right.
So I wanted to really be approachable. Like maybe sometimes it does not sound as authentic as some of the recipes, but I still feel like um I want to make it like very very friendly, so people are not intimidated of like getting started.
I think that's actually really great because a lot of folks, in my experience, they bring a lot of baggage into the kitchen. And so they're afraid to veer away from a recipe to adapt to whatever their situation is. So I think
Hmm.
by you giving them permission to expand how they get to this food, I think is a really great thing, great service. And speaking of that, somebody asked in the chat about the ingredients that you call for in your recipes. There's a lot of typical things, but is there anything that is uh, you know, so special that they can't find at their regular grocery store, or a quick trip to an Asian market? Like
I
how
feel
what's
like
your approach on ingredients?
the most difficult one is Shaoxing wine, the Shaoxing cooking wine, which is for me is as important as soy sauce. Like I feel like that's the biggest. Like I would buy that before I even buy a vinegar, and vinegar is important. Uh, but that is one tricky thing because it's quite strong. So you cannot like where like for example in New York you cannot find the regular one at the grocery store because it's the alcohol content is too high. They're not allowed to sell. If the grocery store doesn't carry a liquor license, they cannot sell that.
Mhm.
So you have to find the one that is salted. The one you um usually a very small percentage of salt. It doesn't really taste that salty, but it's the one that with salt added that you can find in a grocery store. But if you want to get the really high quality, the very good one without the salt, I think that's actually pretty challenging. I usually actually I kind of like go around and ask like a liquor store if they ever carry it. And surprisingly, some of the liquor stores they actually do, because I think Chinese cooking is getting popular. A lot of people ask about it, so you might able to get from there. And again, and of course, like I feel like if you really cannot find it, because it's one of those things it's very hard to find online because of the shipping restrictions of alcohol. Because other things like vinegar, soy sauce, all those oyster sauce, like all the dried ingredients, most of the stuff you can find online these days. But the wine is one of those like you probably have to go somewhere to find it. And I think if you cannot find Shaoxing wine, the best alternative is the dry sherry.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
do have that always in my pantry as well. I do like the taste. It's a little bit fruitier. It has like a pretty special taste, but it's very close.
So, do you have a brand recommendation for the Shaoxing wine, the rice wine?
I usually get the Huadiao. I actually, but on the bottle it's always in Chinese. It's kind of hard to describe. Yeah.
Oops. I meant to. I put it in the chat, but then I didn't send it to everybody. So 1 second, I will spell that out. So if you buy so let's make sure we
I
spell this.
Yeah, I'm
Shaoxing.
pretty sure I have a picture in the book that I have like showed there's like showing the bottle.
Great.
They might look slightly different. Like there are like several labels, and usually I would like not go for the cheapest one. Just get the one that is slightly more expensive. Usually it's better. Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody asked in the chat whether you have tried induction stoves and whether that has worked for you, if so.
I actually not, which is unfortunate because I got so many questions. I've never came across one so far. I have an idea how it works because I know that it heat up really, really fast. Um, I think I've cooked with cookwares that are like, it's like come together with this little induction heating element. So I think it's probably similar. And probably like a little bit more powerful. So I actually think it should work really well because I even worked with an electric stove, and I think electric stove is the worst one because it takes forever to heat up and it doesn't cool down. Like literally when I'm doing a stir fry on the electric stove, I have to move the pan directly off the stove. I have to put it somewhere else. Well, if I wanted to like, rest for a little bit and I have to put it back. I always highest heat and I like kind of like do a lot of tweaking myself, like control the cooking pace. Induction stove, I think it heat up and cool down very fast. So in that sense, it's like more similar to gas stove when you're controlling heat, which I really, really love. And it's just, like it's the same with the electric. You have this flat surface. So what you do is you use a large skillet, and I personally like the one that is slightly heavier. Like the heavier you can get, the better because it just hold heat much, much better. And I think induction always like stove is great. Like I think there's like a gas stove ban in New York coming up. Like I don't know how this going. I'm like really, really scared. Uh, if in 10 years they ban if the government ban the gas stove, I think I'm just gonna go with the induction. That's how I feel about it.
I've had inconsistent experience with induction hobs, but I haven't tried an induction hob that is specifically for woks, the ones that are curved. I've only had the flat ones, and so the heat's inconsistent. Like I want it to be so great. Maybe
Really? So
maybe
do
like
you do
maybe
you cook with a
someday.
do you cook with a skillet or a wok on the flat?
On a flat top,
Yeah, yeah,
um, a flat bottom wok, but I have a gas
yeah.
stove.
Well, that's the thing. I think the issue is that, it's only the surface that contact the stove get heat up. The wall never gets heat up, no matter how long you heat it. Like if you overheat it, some stuff get burned. That's my experience. That's why I feel like, the best your best bet is get one of the largest skillet you can, so it's like full contact. You just need to be like careful about stirring. Like you kind of like, more like flipping. And
Right,
you can use a pair of tongs, or like for me, I use chopstick to, to flip things instead of like you cannot do the stir fry
right,
like that. Yeah.
right. Yeah, it's challenging, but I think everybody has a different way of addressing that. There are folks who have the outdoor burners, like
Oh
the really
yes,
high
that's the
BTU
best one. That's the
burners.
best one. Yeah,
Those are
for sure.
amazing, but
Yeah,
you
that's the
have
best
to be
one.
very careful not to burn down your house.
Yeah.
Um, there's another question in the or a comment in the Q&A. I really appreciate you adapting to what people have. Have you considered to have a side column with super traditional and authentic Beijing fares for all your Chinese followers? So that's a question from the
Uh,
audience.
oh, that's tough. Uh, I think I do have, at least on my blog, I feel like I have the two type of dishes. The one is like I'm pretty like much adapted to like, you know, home cooks who are like maybe not super experienced. And I do have some, they're already there are more, if how to say it, more authentic or like a little bit more complicated. I feel like I have some of that. But I don't know if I would do it, for example, if I already have a fried cabbage that is cooked on a skillet, I don't know if I'm gonna do something like a same recipe and cook in the wok. I don't think I would do that. But I do share, like as a Beijinger, I share things like tofu now, douhua,
Mm,
but it's a savory one with the brown gravy. like very, very big. It's a very Beijing thing. Like, and I share dalu mian, which is,
Mm.
it's another like gravy noodle with like lily flowers and wood ear mushrooms and, and a little pork and stuff. So I do share these dishes. And I think they fairly have a smaller audience, but those are like, for me, they're very, very important. Like those are my favorite things. So I do share those recipes.
Yeah. Oh, so here's another question. Where do you stand on using or not using MSG? And do you ever feel the need to defend its use or debunking the myths out there?
I think it should be debunked because it's really great, like so tasty. Like that's why your home cooking is never taste like restaurant because you don't use MSG. That's how I feel about it. I personally don't really use much on the blog because I know it's kind of like have this controversial thing here. Like many people don't like it, and I think if a dish it tastes great enough by not using it, you can always add a little bit to make it nicer. And I do personally like growing up, like my mom, she likes to use the chicken bouillon powder, which is pretty much MSG. I think it's just a fancier MSG. They call it like a nicer name, so people are not afraid to use them. So I use those too. I think they're like nice. It's like a different form, but essentially it's the same thing. It's like MSG. I use in very simple things because I personally like to cook like very quick, simple stuff. Maybe I will add a splash of that, or I also like to use mushroom powder. Uh, and I do have MSG salt in my kitchen, but I don't think I use it every day. Yeah, I don't think you need to use it in all the dishes, but I a little bit does help a lot.
Mm. Um, and someone's commenting about the excessive use causes um, issues with
I think
pressure on
so
the
because
temples.
it's pretty much it's just salt, like
Yeah.
high sodium thing. Like if you eat too much, it's just like not great. Like it's like trying to reduce salt in your dishes. And I do think I don't know what is that, like if it's MSG or just low quality ingredient. Because if you go to, really eat like hole in the wall restaurant when it's like really, really cheap, like it's so cheap, it's just like you think like how they can have like homemade dumpling, like handmade for $2 to get six. Like how, I cannot even get ingredients for that price.
Right.
So and then I eat a bunch and then I have had it like later. I don't know if it's MSG in the wonton soup or it's just like maybe the ingredients are a little bit like I don't know. It's like a cheaper, definitely not organic ingredient.
I think that's a fair point. And
Yeah.
and honestly, if you are excessive on anything, there are ill effects. So there's a clarification on the previous question about Beijing style recipes, and this person was wondering more about things like Xiaobing or things that are more traditionally associated with northeastern China.
I would love to. It's hard to make though. Like the shao has been in my mind for a while. Like shaobing, dabing, like all kinds of bread. Um, they're like quite challenging to make. I think I've made once, maybe. I was like, no, this is not ready. Like I feel like no, this recipe need like improvement.
Mhm.
Uh, that is actually one of my like really my wish is to write a Northern Chinese cookbook.
Mm.
That's like so like many years. Like I think one day I will definitely work on it.
Mm.
Um, and I want to share all the traditional food. But I think unfortunately the world is not ready yet because I did pitch this idea before. The publishers are nah, we want like easy Chinese takeout. Go cook.
Wait a
It's like
minute. Wait a minute. I want to know, like, what were some of the recipes that you were suggesting in this proposal that they turned down?
uh I'm not gonna like drag this for into
No,
a
no,
very
no,
long
no.
conversation, but I think uh a lot of things are very it's not that well known. A lot of the dishes, like a lot of northern dishes, they're not the most popular type of food here in the US. So it's like less known in general. No, I'm not saying the dumplings and noodles, like those are like always popular, but I think the concept of northern Chinese food is not as popular as, Cantonese food, Shanghai and Sichuan. That's just how I feel about it.
Well,
I
so
mean,
like, what are a couple of dishes that you're thinking about?
oh God, there, I think like all kinds of bread. One thing is like, it's like those stuffed bread, like, in this, so in this cookbook, I actually try to include a few dishes that are from northern. I try to sneak a few things here and there. It's not really about the dish itself, it's also about the ingredient and such. For example, like I have the spring roll recipe in the book. It's not like entirely like a northern traditional dish, but it's like that's from northern. I like to make my spring roll this way. It's instead of using like cabbage or like it's even a sweet filling for certain like red bean, I think is like a traditional one. uh I like the popular cabbage and carrot and all that stuff. Mine is uses chive and mushroom and wood ear. Like it's like a very very savory feeling. And I have the chive pocket, and we actually have all kinds of pockets. It's like xiaobing, like those fried cake. It's like a very important part of food, like because they have different come in different shapes and different preparing methods, with different stuffing. Um, there are dishes like like 炒合菜 is like it's a bean sprout stir fry with eggs and chive, and you eat with the duck pancake.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I feel like these are, and also it's like if we do a mushu pork, it's a totally different mushu pork. It's not the cabbage stir fry with chicken. It's a very light pork with cucumber and dried lily flower and wood ear mushroom with a very very light broth.
Mhm.
So those are things that are very like uh, local and traditional. But I think if I talk about like that, people are like, "Wow, this is not the mushu pork I want." So
I I think there's definitely room for it. So I'm just gonna say that.
I hope so. I really hope so. I think
No, there is.
because I think I've tried to sneak things in my blog here and there, and
Mhm.
you can definitely see like what's popular are the ones that people know, because it's very hard to convince people to cook something they never taste. Even it might sound good, or I don't know, may sound weird, but it's like from my experience, it's hard to convince people to cook something they've never heard of and never tasted before, because it's very, like it's just, I don't know, it's hard. Versus you know like a chow mein dish, or like like anything like that is going to be like immediately people are like, oh, I want to make this for dinner, because I don't have to order it from the restaurant. So I do, yeah. You know what, I cannot I cannot blame this on publisher or anything. Like if I tried harder, I probably can get it somewhere. But for me personally, I feel like this is something I really want to take time and
Mhm.
make it really really good,
Mhm.
and release
That
at a time when I'm ready for it too. So
that makes sense. That makes
yeah,
sense. Um, so somebody says in the chat, it would be great if you made videos to introduce the Northern Chinese dishes and why they're important to you, and that will help make it
I think
popular.
so. That's good. I do YouTube videos for my recipes, like especially since last year I started to create videos for almost like all my new recipes, and even some of the old ones. But I do think, uh, yeah, like it's one of those projects. I actually had planned to go back to China in 2020 to like shoot food, and obviously it was canceled. And since then, I
Mhm.
haven't managed to go back yet. I do want to like not just what I cook in the kitchen, because there are so many like really nice things. They're fairly hard to make. Like but I, like the topic like Peking duck, like literally growing up, it's like so good.
Mm-hmm.
Always get disappointed whenever I try it here, but I mean, I understand it's very, very hard to make, and I want to like, do topics on those things. And it will be great if I can travel back and, make more videos and articles on that.
That's fantastic. Well, and to be fair, Beijing duck is very, very challenging and not something that anybody can replicate easily in their home kitchen. So don't
It's
feel bad
very,
about that.
it is so like I don't think I'll ever post a recipe. If I'm posting a Peking duck recipe, I'll call it like not Peking duck, but it's like something similar. Like because I think because I grew up in that environment, and it make me actually like respect for the chef, because it's like there are like the shop has been existing for hundreds of years, and they are some of the most famous ones. And we actually know, it's like the chain, they're like been like hundreds of years old, and we know which store to go for the best one among all these chains. Like we can kind of like pick the best one among the best chefs, and it's like very special because of the stove they use and the process, and also the type of duck you can get.
Yeah.
So it's like very, very, I think it's pretty much impossible to make at home, because the stove just like, you actually have to cook like with very high heat from
Mhm.
outside. Otherwise it's
Mhm.
not right.
Yeah, it's too hard. It's too hard. And
Yeah.
there are good representations of it at restaurants. So that's something that I just don't
Yeah, I know.
even
Yeah, right. That's how you cut it,
like.
because cutting it itself is
Oh,
actually a very, very skillful thing. Like very
exactly.
few people can do it.
So we have just a few minutes left. Maybe you can, I know it's hard to pick a favorite recipe, but maybe what are some highlights for you, or what do you think some of the most popular recipes are that are in the book?
So far, I think some of the popular recipes are the orange cauliflower, which is actually I like that one too, because it's very easy to make, and you don't really need special ingredients. You can just make it, and it's nice. And the Chinese eggplant with garlic sauce is always really great one. And I think some of the noodle dishes like the sesame noodle and then the noodles are popular. Yeah.
And if you make a meal for yourself, like what are your go-to dishes that you make when you just don't want to think about it?
I personally like to make things that are super simple. For example, I always like to make soups. Like a Napa cabbage soup with tofu is like, oh, yum, like simple. And fried rice, all kinds of fried rice, like never need to
Mhm.
think about it. And like veggie stir fries, I actually have quite a few in this book. For example, the 4 ingredient okra stir fry, like just like it takes like 5 minutes, just so easy.
And people put there's like Brussels sprouts and okra. I think those are some
Hmm.
ingredients that people don't realize can easily be stir fried and be delicious. So I think that's awesome that you have included that. Oh, good. We have another question. Um, okay, so this person just got the book today, so hasn't had a chance to look through, but wants to know what kind of rice do you use here in the US?
Uh, so this is a long answer. So if I'm cooking rice and eating rice, I like to use brown rice. It's a mix. I actually do a blend myself. I use brown rice, usually a medium or short grain brown rice, mixed with wild rice and some quinoa and sometimes barley or sometimes farro. It's like a very, very like wholesome rice. I do sometimes just brown rice itself when I'm actually lazy, but I like to eat like brown rice. And if I'm making if I have to, keep in mind I'm making stir fry, like a fried rice, I usually use jasmine rice. because it gives you that, you know, nice crispy, you know, the rice is like the grain will separate and they fry up nicely, nice and, you know, crunchy and nice in the fried rice. If I'm making sushi, I'll use short grain sushi rice, which I also have. And yeah, and but you know, in China where I grew up, we use the short grain white rice for daily, like, you know, the steamed rice and eating and making congee. Oh yes, congee. If you make congee, if I make congee, it's the short grain white rice because it has like a you know, like a gooey, stickier texture, and it's just nice.
So, audience person, that's a lot of different rices for you to consider. Similarly, and I tend to use medium for every day as a medium grain rice. And then we have jasmine as well, and just depending on what it is that we're making, and brown rice. So brown rice
Yeah,
fried
right.
rice is
Yeah,
fantastic. I love
I
brown
know. I
rice
do
fried
that
rice.
too. Yeah, me too. I like it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
awesome. Let's see. I think we have time for maybe one other question if somebody has a question. I'll just keep riffing here. I think that there definitely is room for more traditional dishes. That folks are way more adventurous now. If you look at restaurants, well, let me qualify that. Definitely in the larger metropolitan areas where there are more diverse Chinese restaurants and Taiwanese restaurants, you can experience some of the things that maybe you wouldn't find in a smaller town. But I think there's definitely room. So I think we're all going to look forward to your Beijing style cookbook when it comes
Hope
out.
so.
And here's Zoe.
I'm definitely looking forward to that next cookbook too. I was just flipping through. The sesame noodles are one that are on my list to make. That's definitely a favorite from just being a kid and eating at restaurants in New York City and things like that. Thank you so much, both of you, for joining us. And Maggie, congratulations on the book. It is such a fantastic book, super approachable, super delicious, wonderful work here. So thank you so much. And everyone, thank you so much for joining us this evening, and we will see you all again soon. Thanks, Maggie. Thanks, Hsiao-Ching.
Bye.
Bye.